Hello again and welcome to another video. I'm Ben McCallum and I'm going to show you how to edit some underwater images so that you can get the colors correct to somewhere close to what they were and get rid of that nasty blue which basically washes out all of the colors. So today I'm actually going to be using Aperture. This should work with pretty much any of the photo softwares that you use. So I'm just going to use Aperture, but the principles are the same regardless of the software that you're using. So I'm going to show you how to get photos where you're bringing out the color and you're going to be turning an image from somewhere sort of like this one here where you've got the blues which have washed out all the color, and you can bring in and introduce the color to more of what it was where you've got your yellows and the reds. Because what happens once you go underwater, within the first 5 meters or so when you go underwater, you lose the color red. And the further you go down, the more colors you lose until you're pretty much left with green and blue. So they're the colors that we have to put back into the image. So what we first of all want to do, I'm just going to show you, I'll just come back down here. I'm going to show you on this photo here that I found when we were out diving up at Cairns. This was a cuttlefish. So this one's not something you usually get to come across unless you're actually diving. If you're snorkeling, you'll be fairly lucky to find one. But first of all, what I want to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to come down to my white balance tool and I'm going to choose an area which I actually think should be close to white, because what happens is your camera finds it difficult when you're underwater to actually choose the correct white balance setting. So I'm going to grab my little dropper tool here and I'm just going to take the guess here that this part of this cuttlefish should have been white. So clicking on that, that's automatically changed all of the rest of the colors and made that as my standard white. If there was something in particular in this image that you knew was white, say there was a shell down here or something like that, you can actually choose that and use that as your white. So what you'll notice is I'm going to say that this little shell down here, I know that that's white. So if I grabbed that and I came down and I chose that, and that little section there, and that is creating that as the white balance area, which is then in turn adjusting the rest of the image. Now for me personally, I don't think that that was white, so I'm just going to go back to the setting that I was on, and I'm going to use this to start with because this will also show you some other adjustment tools that you can do if you can't get the white balance to work properly. So the white balance is the very first thing that you want to do. The second thing that you want to do is you want to pull up a curves bar. Now, obviously, depending on your program, it will look slightly different, but generally what they'll have this RGB setting, which is your general, which adjusts all of the colors and all of the curves and basically responds to the contrast and the brightness. But what I want to do is actually go to the individual colors themselves. Now, what I was saying before is the color red is the first thing that gets lost. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is introduce a tiny little bit more red. I don't want to go too crazy because if you go too far, you'll notice things start to obviously just go completely out of control. And I'm going to come down and I'm actually going to decrease the green and the blue just a little bit because they're the colors that I don't want because there's too much of them. So by decreasing those, what I've done is change it from that to that, which has brought in more of the warmth into the actual cuttlefish itself. So that is pretty much the easiest way for you to adjust the white balance and the color to an image when you're dealing with underwater stuff. Now, obviously, not all of you are going to have a strobe like I did on my camera for doing this. So I'm just going to come out of that and I'm going to show you how to do it with a photograph sort of like this one, where again it's exactly the same technique, but I didn't have any strobe to introduce any light. So the two ways that you want to obviously take your photos so that they're as good as they can, the two main points that I can give you is, number one, get as close to your subject as you can because you'll get more color, and also you'll also get less particles between you and the subject, which means there'll be less pixels and particles in the photo, because as soon as a flash goes off, every little particle in the water will show up. So the first step is obviously get as close as you can, and the second step is use a strobe. Now, this photo over here is not a brilliant photo. This was from a point and shoot camera, but as you can see, this is me taking a photograph of some clownfish here. I've got as close as I possibly could. I've made sure that I've stayed off the coral. I'm actually using 2 fingers here to actually steady myself on some dead coral here so that I'm not touching any of the live stuff. And then I also have my strobe up here as well. Now, by getting this close, I've been able to limit the particles in the water. You'll notice the angle that the person's taken of this shot of me, where you'll be able to see that there's quite a lot of particles in these areas, which shows how much stuff is actually in the water. Now, in this actual photo, this is an unedited version of that subject that I was taking. Now, you'll see that there's not really much particle in this because I've got as close as I could, and it's obviously minimized what was there. So that is one of the main things that I can tell you is get as close as you can because it will reduce the particles. And also, if you can afford it, get yourself a strobe. Yes, they are very expensive. Obviously, depending on what you want to go, you can get the budget ones. But for me, using the professional equipment, which I already had the housing, I definitely wanted to get the professional strobes as well. And in my opinion, they pay off themselves very quickly. But I'll just come back to this one over here, which this photo here has been edited to bring more of the colors in. And I'm going to show you what I did to get these colors without having used any strobe at all, just using the images that were already, the colors that were already there. Now this is the unedited image. So what I've done again, I've gone up here, and fortunately for me, I know what should actually be a white balance because my buddy here, Mark Revelant, he was on holidays as well, and he was out there, and he managed to have a nice little camera here, but it also had a white balance part here on his little point and shoot camera. So that has enabled me to grab a perfect white balance area to begin with because I know that that should be white. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to choose that little white balance tool that he had on his camera, and all of a sudden, you'll notice you've got a lot more color into it. So then you can go to your curves bar again, and I'm going to add a little bit of red, not much because the white balance has actually done quite a good job here. Sorry, I haven't gone to the red one yet. I've got to actually select it. I'm just going to add a tiny little bit because I don't want to go crazy on it. And for me, I actually don't think, I actually want to add a little bit of blue because I do want some of the blue up here. And then the ultimate thing to actually make this image jump a little bit more is to put some more contrast into it. So I've just gone back to the whole curves area, which adjusts more of the contrast. I'm going to put a little S curve in here, which will increase the contrast. So you'll notice the darks are getting darker. I'm just going to grab this a little bit here, add the lights to become a little bit brighter. And then if you want, you can come back up to your vibrance tool here, and you can add more color into the image. And you have transformed a photo which was basically completely blue into a photo with color. Now, if you'll notice, if I zoom in onto these fish down here, they actually look the color that they sort of should. And over here should be the same. You know, looking at the fins of the divers that I was diving with, all the yellows and everything seem to be fairly close to what they were. Now, obviously, you can put more effort into it and actually get closer and closer until you end up being left with images similar to this one. Again, I've done the same process with this and it's come out the same way. And over here, same sort of thing. This photo hasn't really been adjusted that much. I've just increased the contrast a little bit and increased the vibrancy just to bring out more of the colors. So I hope that helps. Come back again and we'll have more videos for you shortly.